Oh, man. What kind of guy would do this, though? What kind of guy? And you know, if he'd do this, what else would he do? I mean, really think about this. What else would he do? Let me put out a few things to you that you may not have read about. And I wouldn't have read about it either because, like, I'm the original slacker, you know, and I, if you really knew me, man, I'm like, I try to do as little as possible and watch as much TV as possible. And you know how in a newspaper, you know, they start like 5 or 6 articles on the front page, and then you got to like jump to some interior page to finish it? I've never understood how that works. Are you supposed to read like just the first 5 paragraphs of all 6 articles and then go and read them in the same order you read them in, trying to remember what you read? Or do you just read one article, the 5 paragraphs, then jump to page 23, read it all the way to the end, then jump all the way back to the front page, read the second article, 5 paragraphs, jump to the page 17, read that all the way to the end, go all the way back to the front page? I mean, that's too much aerobics for me, you know? I mean, that's all. I've always just like skimmed the paper, read the headline, a couple paragraphs, and get to the sports. You know, that's basically been my theory with a newspaper. Well, I started going to the jump page, and let me tell you what I found on the jump page, all right? Let me see if any of you are aware of this. And everything I'm going to tell you here, you can find buried somewhere in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the New Yorker magazine, very traditional publications. In the days after September 11th, when all the planes were grounded and you couldn't fly anywhere, remember this? Nobody could fly. I was stuck here in LA. I live in Manhattan. Our daughter's back there in New York City. This is happening on September 11th. We can't find her. You know, we can't get through the lines. We're all freaked out. We're here. We're stuck here because we were here for the Emmys because our show was nominated for an Emmy Award. So we were out here for that piece of trivial bullshit. Not that I don't mind being stuck in LA, but not, you know, when, you know, your loved ones are back there and you can't find them and the city seems like it's under attack. And so after a couple days, we finally were able to rent a car someplace, some Hertz dealer in LA sticking us up for, I don't know, $2,000 or something to rent the car to drive back to New York. So we made the trip across the country to get back there. But in those 2 or 3 days, no planes flew. All the planes were grounded except one. No. Yes, of course the Air Force was. I'm talking about private commercial planes. A privately, yes. It was a private Saudi jet. It was a private Saudi jet that the Bush administration allowed to fly around America to 4 or 5 cities to pick up nearly 24 members of the bin Laden family and scoot them out of the country over the objections of the FBI. The FBI was furious. The FBI, like most police, when there's a murder, and in this case a mass murder, and you don't know where the murderer is, and you haven't caught the murderer, the police usually like to go and stop by and talk to the family. Any idea where he is? What do you know? What can you tell us? Who do you know? Who does he know? Typical police investigation. I know I've had a few of those visits paid to me. Okay? You know, right? The Bush administration said to the FBI, no, you will not interrogate any of the bin Laden family members, and they're leaving the country. Why? I don't know. I'd like to know. Why? Don't take my word for it. It's in the November 12th New Yorker in an article by Jane Mayer. Why? I was like, I couldn't believe that when I read this. I jumped to another page and I find out that the George W. Bush, the first oil venture Daddy set him up in back in the 80s, when he said, you know, Georgie, you got to get to work here. You got to have a job. You know, this is before the baseball team job he got him. This is the oil job. He starts up a company for him called Arbusto, which I'm told is Spanish for bush. I don't know. Is it? It's Spanish for shrub? Arbusto, who funded Arbusto? Who funded George W.'s first oil company? The bin Laden family. Are you aware of this? George Sr., after leaving the White House in 1993, forms a private company, an equity firm with James Baker, called the Carlyle Group. Who's one of their main backers? The Bin Laden family. Where does George Sr. stay when he goes to Saudi Arabia in the last 10 years? At the Bin Laden Palace. Now, somebody said to me, well, Mike, come on, you can't paint all the Bin Ladens with one big brushstroke. You can't blame the parents just because, Sonny Boy here, turned out bad. I said, you're absolutely right. I am sure these are good people, salt of the earth, right? But let me ask you this. Do you think that Barbara and George Bush would be having a sleepover at Charles Manson's parents' house? I mean, at the same time that Bin Laden is supposedly the mastermind of all evil, George and Barbara are just staying there at the parents' house. I'm sure Manson's parents are great people too. Mother Teresa types. I don't think they'd be staying there though. Just a guess. I'm just guessing. What is this? What is this? Then you go to the BBC website, the BBC over in Britain, read their news. Boy, there you learn about us on their site, okay? Go to the CBC in Canada, learn about us, okay? I'm not quoting the black helicopter sites for you here, You don't have to go to the conspiracy theorist sites to get this information. The BBC report that in 1995, the Taliban were hosted in Houston by a group of oil company executives who had the Taliban leadership come over to Houston to meet with them to sit down and plan on building a pipeline that would be built by the Unocal company through Afghanistan to bring natural gas through Afghanistan and out to the sea. You aware of this? Yep. And they met with the Taliban and were meeting with them all through the late 90s. Who was going to help build the pipeline? Halliburton. Who's the head of Halliburton in the 90s? Big Dick Cheney. All right? Now, what is going on here? Last May, according to the LA Times, of May 22nd of last year, George W. Bush gave the Taliban $43 million in aid. Are you aware of this? Look it up. $43 million of your tax money went to the supposedly terrorist group that was harboring bin Laden and al-Qaeda after they'd blown up the coal and blown up the African embassies. And we were giving them our tax money? What's that about? Either they're harboring the terrorists or we give them humanitarian aid because they need humanitarian aid. Which is it? Which is it? It can't be both. Are the Taliban humanitarian or are they not? Or are they terrorists? What's going on here? There are so many questions about September 11th that need to be answered. I'm not drawing any conclusions here. I don't have the answers. But I have a right, and I'm telling you, and I think this is one of the reasons why this book has risen to the top of the bestseller list, is because I think the American people, after 5 or 6 months of staying in the house and just shutting up and being told to shut up and being told by Ari Fleischer to be careful what you say and be careful what you do, I think they're sick and tired of being careful of what they have to say. I think it's an American responsibility to ask questions. To ask the questions. Who's going to ask the questions? I would like you today, tomorrow, to call the White House and ask the questions. Just call them up. You can call them up, There's like a reader, like a consumer response line. He'll do, but everyone has to do it. If just a couple do it, then we won't see those two again. So it's like, everyone has to do it. And I've been asking this every night on the tour, thousands of people every day on this tour that I'm talking to, and I'm asking, call this number, 202-456-1414. I'll give it to you again. All right, that's the number for the White House. Call them up and ask them the 5 questions. What about the Unocal pipeline? What about the plane that flew around America after September 11th? What about the Taliban and the oil company executives when Bush was governor of Texas? What are the financial connections between the bin Ladens and the Bushes? Are you telling me out of 6 billion people on this planet, it's just a coincidence that one of the Bushes is the president and one of the bin Ladens is the attacker? It's just a coincidence? What's going on here? What deal went south? What aren't they telling us? The 5th question to George W. Bush, 202-456-1414. Here's the 5th question. When you gonna resign? When you gonna resign? I actually have called for Bush to resign on opening day of baseball season. right in the middle of Enron Field in Houston. Right there with Kenny Boy and all the Enroners and the doodah, the Enron, and the who, all of them. I want them all there. I'll throw out the first pitch and I'll decide who I'm going to hit. I want them all there. The Brewers are playing the Astros. It's 4:05 p.m. Central Time. April 2nd, opening day. I want Bush there. Bring Big Dick with you. And apologize to the American people. Apologize to the people in Houston for being in bed with this guy who stole their pension, who took off with the money. I mean, just think about the obscenity of Enron. Back in September, while the rest of us were glued to the television screens, watching those firemen looking for their brothers and their loved ones in the rubble of New York. That's what we were watching. But what were the Enron executives watching? The same TV screen, the same images of death and destruction. They're watching the little ticker across the bottom of the screen, hoping that they can steal as much of the money as they can before the Enron price sinks to 29 cents a share. That's what they're watching. What kind of obscenity is that? What kind of outrage is that? Well, here's the most interesting thing I found on the jump page of the Washington Post 2 days after September 11th. On paragraph like 54, it says, Osama bin Laden is on dialysis. Are you aware of this? He's hooked up to a kidney machine and has been for the last 18 months. Now, I mean, even if you were believing Bush in those first days when he was saying it was Osama bin Laden was the mastermind here, or the evildoer, it's like once you read this paragraph, it's like he